It's a big pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, let me ask you about this beautiful short film that you shot, very classical. Let me know how born is the project?
Well, for me, I started working on Cemetery Tales about 7 years ago. And the idea originally was to do a movie. But when I have extra time, when I visit cities around the world or in America, I like to go on ghost tours and visit cemeteries. And I just started getting ideas from each city I went to. And then I thought of the idea in Edinburgh, Scotland, that I wanted to do something that was more of a series than a movie. And it was 1 year ago, this festival, I was sitting down at a little restaurant near the water, and I was looking at my producing partner, and I said, you know, I think I'd like to have a movie here next year. And he said to me, he goes, well, what can we do to make that happen? And I said, I don't know, give me some time, let me think about it. And I had been toying around with this for a while, and my client and good friend George Romero passed away in July of 2017, and the words of George kept popping into my head. When you start something, finish it. If you write it, finish it. If you start to shoot it, finish it. And I thought, well, you know what, now's the time to do this. So I sat down, and Matt O'Neill, my producing partner, we looked at all the stories that I had, which was a folder full, and this was the first one that we pulled out, and we tailor-made it for our star, Traci, and she brought it to life. And that's where we are now.
I told you before, you look like a diva of the 50s on the film.
I am.
You are. Of course you are. Well, how do you know about the project and you involved in the idea, or you need to think about it? How do you prepare the character? Because it's a character with a lot of faces on the film. It's a short film, but you have a lot of development of the character, I think. It's true.
As far as preparing you,
Yeah.
I just really thought about and watched performances from the 40s and 50s, and I'm a huge fan of that era of filmmaking and costume and you know, the glamour of old Hollywood. You know, I like that a lot personally, so it's something that I definitely always wanted to do. So when Cris brought it to me, I thought, well, I've never made a black and white film before, and I haven't had the opportunity to play a 1940s movie star, so why wouldn't you? And you know, it was just you know, a real adventure in that respect. The hard part about it was that she's not very likable. You know, I always try to find something redeeming in characters that I play, and we spoke about that a lot. And you know, I said to Cris, I don't want it to be one note, but you know, in you know, seeing the cut, the final product and everything, the moments that I gave it where maybe she was a bit more likable didn't make it into the film. He chose, as a director, you know, he wanted her to be a certain way. He thought that was more effective, and I can completely see why. You know, he would choose that. Me as an artist, I always try to redeem myself, redeem my characters, and she's one that I think that you maybe feel for her, but you don't necessarily like her. So I'm really curious to see what the audiences think of her.
I love the scene that you are talking directly to the camera, I told you before, because it's like if you are looking at Vincent Price film.
Yeah,
you know, has this taste. Was something that you want to recreate like a homage, or was incidental?
No, it really wasn't. I love Vincent Price, and I'm a big fan of his movies, and own most of them, but are you referring to the scene in the cemetery when she's talking directly to the camera? What I really wanted there even though at the cemetery it's just her, I wanted the presence of her sister to be there. So it's as though she's talking to her sister. So you see the cuts to the tombstone. So the tombstone becomes her sister, essentially. And she's having this conversation with it. I think some of my favorite scenes of the film are the cemetery scenes because they're the most intimate. It reveals the real truth. And like Traci said, you want to feel for her, but you don't particularly like her, even though she probably was the underdog. Her sister Victoria always took the spotlight.
It was her fault.
You just didn't like her. And so even some of the nice ad-lib stuff that Traci did that she threw in was fabulous. I think my favorite scene of the cemetery is when you do that little laugh. I think it's great. It's just this kind of little laugh that she does before she says that she's not going to do one more thing for her except for this. And then she pours the flask on the ground. But
Drink up, bitch.
It's effective, that speaking directly into the camera. I think it's really effective, and it really does work.
And it's very strange for an actor to do. So thank you for that.
Of course. But it also does kind of play back to some of those great films of the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
And it has I mean, the film is beautiful, so I'm not comparing it to that. But it reminds me of like some of the stuff that I loved about like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
You don't really know. It has like a weirdness to it too, especially at the end with the staircase and that brilliant like pull back, and you're like, what's going on? It's yeah. I mean, you could almost see it like becoming a total. If it was a film and it became that turn and it becomes a horror film. You know what I love? I love myself as the dead sister, like in the costume. That's when I was like, ooh, now it's getting really good. I wanted to play that role. I wanted to like, why can't the second half of it be this character, like wreaking her revenge on everything? That's where it got exciting to me. Enough of this crying and moping and drinking. I want to kill all these people that did me wrong.
Please give me a knife. It's curious because in this scene, when you are your sister in the film, it's like more modern than the other sister. You know?
More modern?
Yeah, the hair, this, you know.
Oh, because she's been dead and buried for a while. Yes.
But looks more, you know.
She just looks a little crazy.
Yeah, a little bit.
And I'll tell you where that did come from a Vincent Price film. That came from The House of Usher.
Oh.
When his sister comes back.
Yeah.
And when the camera pans to her and you see that kind of crazy-haired, wild look. But with Traci, I didn't want to be too crazy and wild because I wanted that beauty to still be there. Because shooting in black and white, I love old black and white films. Yeah. And the women always were glamorous, even in the most horrible situations. Mm-hmm. Fall down a mountain and they'd get up and they'd still be beautiful. So I always wanted to have that. But
it's easy to do it with her.
It is very easy to do with her.
It took a lot of armor.
But it was great.
Deconstruction.
It was great, but I think that scene on top of the stairs is really great because there's some great lens that we use for that. Yeah. When she turns and she sees her sister, and you see that same lens that Hitchcock used in Vertigo. Yeah. And of course when she falls backwards and she's going in slow motion. So there's something that's really elegant to it, and yet, pretty terrifying in a way, but I didn't want it to be terrifying in modern day. I wanted it to be terrifying like we would have seen it in 1949, which is when it's supposed to take place. So Traci does it brilliantly, and she is my Victoria Vivian through and through.
You will be receiving here in Sitges an honorific award. What means for you to be here in Sitges?
It's pretty stunning to be here. First of all, I've never been to Spain before, and this being
is your first time in Spain?
Yes, and so Sitges is so beautiful. And I've heard this, but I really had no idea. You know, it's really special. And, you know, the fact that this film festival is just, I mean, just so prestigious. I'm very humbled by it, and I'm really excited, and it's quite an honor to be recognized in this way. So, you know, pretty speechless. It's great. I love Barcelona. It's much kinder than where we came from.
Much kinder than America right now. It's
Right
true.
now,
The
right?
food is
true.
better.
The food is better. Yes.
Yeah.
The weather, it depends.
I don't know. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed all of it. It sounds pretty good.
Please come back.
Well, do I have to leave?
Sorry?
I stay? No.
If you want, why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, returning to the short film, which was the more difficult part to shoot on the film for you and for you?
You go first, Trace.
It was really difficult to shoot something this emotional this fast because Cris shot it in just a few days. And it was, you know, it was difficult for me, that level of sort of insanity that I had to maintain. I'm really glad that I did it because it's, you know, unlike anything that I've ever done, and that's what I always look for in a project to you know, for that new experience, that new character, that new growth. So it was incredible, and it was really difficult that way. And you know, I thank you for putting up with me because it was, you know, people think that they see the final product, but what goes into it. And you know, it's funny because sometimes when you're doing comedy, it's not funny, it's not fun. And when you're, you know, doing something like this, the crazy can take hold for a second. So it made me feel a little like, oh wow, stepping back from the edge. I can't say that I enjoyed making this film, but it was incredibly rewarding, if that makes sense, at the same time.
Okay.
I think for myself, you know, before we started, I had a full head of hair. And now it's all gone again.
Such a drama queen.
But you know, the interesting thing for me, there were a couple of challenging things with this. First of all, the location where we shot the main portion of the house was this beautiful Tuscan mansion up in the Hollywood Hills, owned formerly by James Whale, director of Frankenstein and
you
Bride of
joking me?
Frankenstein. And so I wanted to shoot there badly, but the man who owns it made it so complicated. And it was not a lot of fun dealing with him.
Yeah.
Just always something. And so that was the first bit of complication, which kind of took me out of my happiness that I wanted to be in, because I was dealing with this very greedy, unhappy man. And then I think the other part of it that was complicated was just keeping to a real rigorous schedule, because, you know, there were a lot of things that we really wanted to take our time to do, and we didn't get a chance to take as much time. But I had the right actors, and because they were all professionals, we were able to get what we needed within just a couple of takes. We didn't have the luxury of doing 5 or 6 takes or spending a little extra time. So that was, for me, the complication of it. The actors were great, the script was great, my crew was fabulous, my producer, Matt O'Neill, was fabulous. I walked out of this working with some people that I said I never want to work without them again. I loved working with them. My producer, my editor, Michael Bruning, they're all fabulous people. And I would, any day of the week, work with Traci again, because first of all, I love her. Truly,
This is good to know.
she's a friend, and I care for her greatly. And so to work with her was wonderful. To work with Bruce Davison was wonderful. These people are all clients of mine.
Yeah, I know.
And so that made it extra special, was that I got to work with people who were all mine. I didn't have casting directors or producers saying they weren't right for the job.
Yeah.
And I got to do it the way I wanted to. And to me, at the end of the day, I have absolutely no reason to be unhappy, because I'm really proud of what you saw and what the audience will see tonight. I'm not embarrassed by it. I feel like everything that I needed to get in the time I had, I got.
You did. You
I
did such a
need
good
to
job.
ask this. How is Cris as a fiction director?
I think Chris did a great job. He did a great. I think that that's really difficult to choose genre as your first. I mean, specific period piece as your first directorial. I mean, I know that you've done documentaries, obviously, but to choose that's not easy, because not only are you dealing with the emotion, you're dealing with an emotional script, and he also was one of the writers, and so that's, making sure the words are there and the story is there, and how are you going to cut it, and you have time constraints, and then you have to also think about, wait a minute, there's a light socket on the wall, and that's not supposed to be there, it's 1940s, to keep it, everything authentic. Too. I think that was a lot. He wore a lot of hats. So I applaud him for that. And, it was a really wild experience. It was incredible.
That was the complicated part, because all throughout the house, even though it's this beautiful Tuscan mansion from the late 20s, all this modernization had been done. So there's light sockets everywhere and vent fans, and we spent a fortune just getting all of that digitally removed because there was no filming around it. It was there. So it was that was also challenging, but that was more challenging in post-production than dealing with it in real production. So anyway, it was a beautiful experience, and taking on 1949 period black and white was complicated, because we had over 200 props and the car and the tombstone and all of that. But my opinion always had been, and I believe this, if I can't sell 1949 to the audience, I've destroyed the film. And I think people do walk away feeling like they're watching an old movie. In fact, I had a beautiful review and compliment come in the other day from someone who said, if I wouldn't have known this was yours and I was flipping through the channel, I would have thought it was an episode of The Twilight Zone. And that's a pretty good compliment. Mm-hmm. So, for that, job well done.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the interview.
Of course.